The crystalline halls of the Vexari palace trembled as Princess Zerakai clutched her father's robes, her bioluminescent scales flickering between deep purple and pale silver, colors of distress among her kind. Beyond the transparent walls, the human fleet hung in orbit like predatory birds, their vessels crude compared to Vexari technology, yet somehow far more menacing. "Father, please," Zerakai whispered, her voice carrying the melodic harmonics of her species. "Send anyone else. Send your best generals, your finest warriors. But not him. Not the human." Emperor Thexavar regarded his daughter with 4 amber eyes, each blinking independently in confusion. In 300 cycles, he had never seen her fear anything. She had faced the void beasts of Kepler 9, had negotiated with the war tribes of Andromeda, had even survived an assassination attempt by the Shadow Syndicate, yet now she trembled at the mere mention of a single human warrior. "Child, they are primitives," Thexvar said, his mandibles clicking softly. "They only achieved faster than light travel 30 of their years ago. Their weapons are projectile-based. Their ships leak atmosphere. What could one human possibly do that our entire security force cannot prevent?" Zerakai's scales flashed crimson. "You don't understand. None of you understand what humans are." 3 months earlier, Zerakai had been on a diplomatic survey mission to the frontier worlds, those lawless planets where the Galactic Council's reach barely extended. Her ship had been ambushed by Craxi pirates, vicious reptilian raiders who had plagued shipping lanes for decades. The Vexari security detail had been slaughtered within minutes. The Craxi didn't want ransom. They wanted trophies. A Vexari princess would fetch a high price in the black markets, alive or dead. That's when she met Jack Harper. The human had been in a trading post on the same planet, some backwater called Epsilon 7. He was tall by Vexari standards, with that peculiar human musculature that seemed simultaneously inefficient and terrifying. Brown hair, gray eyes that held something Zerakai's species had never evolved, something ancient and predatory. The Craxi had dragged her through the settlement, and every species there had looked away. Even the warlike Thorians, with their honor codes and battle traditions, had avoided confrontation with 12 heavily armed pirates. Every species except one. Jack Harper had been sitting at a bar, drinking something amber-colored. He'd looked at her once, then at the Craxi, then calmly finished his drink. What happened next still gave Zerakai nightmares. Humans, she learned, were from a death world. Earth, they called it. A planet of such hostile biology that it had forged humanity in fires that no other known species had endured. Gravity that would crush a Vexari. Diseases that evolved as fast as their hosts. Predators that hunted in packs. Humans hadn't climbed to the top of their food chain. They'd had to fight for every single step. Jack Harper had moved like liquid violence. The first Craxi didn't even see him coming. One moment the human was 20 feet away. The next his fist had caved in the pirate's facial structure. Humans called it adrenaline, that chemical cocktail that turned them into berserkers when threatened. The Craxi had energy weapons, yes, but human reflexes operated on a different temporal scale when that adrenaline flooded their systems. Zerakai had watched, frozen in horror and fascination, as Jack Harper had dismantled 12 armed Craxi pirates with his bare hands and a combat knife. He'd been shot 3 times. It hadn't stopped him. Humans, she discovered, had redundant systems. Pain tolerance evolved from millions of years of persistence hunting, and a will to survive that bordered on madness. When it was over, Jack had casually applied something called medical foam to his wounds, introduced himself politely and asked if she needed transportation back to civilized space. His gray eyes had been calm, almost kind. That's what terrified her most, how quickly he'd switched from predator to protector. Now, 3 months later, those same humans were demanding an audience with the Emperor. They wanted to discuss a mutual defense pact, and they'd sent Jack Harper as their representative. The same Jack Harper who'd saved her life. The same Jack Harper who'd shown her exactly what humans were capable of when pushed. "Father," Zerakai said quietly, "humans are persistence predators. They evolved to chase their prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to fight or flee. Humans evolved to never stop. They have a word, not spite. They'll hurt themselves just to hurt you worse. They'll march through conditions that would kill our warriors and call it training. And worst of all, they form pack bonds." The Emperor's scales shifted to a thoughtful green. "Pack bonds? Jack Harper killed 12 Craxi to save someone he'd never met, of a species he'd only read about. Imagine what he'd do for someone he actually cared about. Imagine what his species would do if we threatened one of their own. Zerakai's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're going to offer us alliance, Father. And if we refuse, we'll make them enemies. I've seen one human angry. I never want to see humanity angry. Emperor Thexvar was silent for a long moment, processing his daughter's words. Finally, he asked, "What do you suggest?" "Accept their terms. Whatever they want, accept it." "Because the alternative," Zerakai shuddered, her scales flickering through a dozen colors of distress. "The alternative is extinction. They're not the strongest species or the smartest or the fastest, but they're the only species that simply refuses to die, and that makes them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." The Emperor looked out at the human fleet, seeing them with new eyes. Those primitive ships suddenly looked less like scrap metal and more like sleeping predators. "Send word," he commanded his advisors. "We will hear the humans' proposal." When Jack Harper entered the throne room an hour later, polite and professional in his simple uniform, Zerakai forced herself to meet his eyes. He smiled at her, a gesture meant to be friendly, but it showed teeth, a predator's warning disguised as a greeting. "Princess," Jack said warmly, "good to see you again." Zerakai's scales involuntarily flashed terror white. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same.